Modern Prologue to the Canterbury Tales. What is the meaning of the word prologue? What is Canterbury? What is tales? What is Canterbury Tales? Literature. Modern literature. Major authors in modern literature. Chaucer. Geoffrey Chaucer. What is the season in the Canterbury Tales? How does the general prologue open? Who wrote general prologue? Burgeoning. Chirruping. What does Chaucer describe in Prologue to the Canterbury Tales? Whose relics is in Canterbury Tales? Relics. Cathedral. So these are the topics or points or words we discuss, and the following points also we discuss in this video. Pilgrimage. How many travelers entered in Tabernae? Tabard Inn. What is Tabard Inn? Where is Tabard Inn? Tavern. Synonym of the word relics. Why do pilgrims travel to Canterbury? Who is Thomas Becket? How did St. Thomas Becket die? When did he die? Who killed St. Thomas Becket? Whom does the pilgrim represent? Medieval social theory. What are the three estates? These are the points we will discuss in this video. Try to understand and try to answer for these questions. At the end of the video also I will ask questions. Try to understand and answer for those questions. Prologue to the Canterbury Tales. Prologue. Prologue meaning introduction. Tales meaning story. Canterbury is a town in Kent. So Prologue to the Canterbury Tales means introduction to the Canterbury Tales. Canterbury Tales. What is Canterbury Tales? The Canterbury Tales are an anthology of 24 short stories written in Middle English by Geoffrey Chaucer. Literature. What is the meaning of the word literature? Written works, especially those with a high and lasting artistic value. Modern literature. The period of the modern literature is 1400 to 1600. Now, what is modern literature? The period between 1400 and 1600 in English literature, often called the early modern period, marks the transition from Middle English into fully modern English. The major authors in modern literature are Geoffrey Chaucer, Edmund Spenser, Sir Thomas Wyatt, Sir Philip Sidney, Francis Bacon, Christopher Marlowe, Thomas Kidd. The period of Chaucer is 1340 to 1400. What is the full name of Chaucer? Geoffrey Chaucer. Now, who is Geoffrey Chaucer? Chaucer was an English poet, writer, and civil servant, best known for the Canterbury Tales. He has been called the father of English literature or the father of English poetry. He was the first writer to be buried in what has since become Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. The narrator opens the prologue to the Canterbury Tales with a description of the return of the spring. How does the poet open the general prologue with a description of the return of spring? What season is mentioned in the Canterbury Tales? The spring season. Spring symbolizes renewal. Chaucer describes the April rains, the burgeoning flower and leaf, and the chirping birds. What does Geoffrey Chaucer describe in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales? Geoffrey Chaucer describes the April rains, the burgeoning flowers and leaves, and chirping birds. Burgeoning meaning budding, growing. Burgeoning flowers and leaves meaning flowers that are actively growing, expanding, and flourishing, often in early stages like budding, but also fully blooming. Chirping meaning high pitched sound, especially of birds. Around this time of year, the narrator says, people begin to feel the desire to go on a pilgrimage to Canterbury to visit the relics of Saint Thomas Becket in Canterbury Cathedral. What is in Canterbury? There is a cathedral. What is in the cathedral? Relics of Saint Thomas Becket. What is the meaning of the word relics? Relics means remains of the saint. Who is Thomas Becket? Thomas Becket is a saint and archbishop of Canterbury Cathedral. Pilgrimage meaning a long travel to a holy place. The narrator tells us that as he prepared to go on such a pilgrimage, staying at a tavern in Southwark called the Tabard, a great company of 29 travelers entered. There were how many travelers? There were 29 travelers. Where did the travelers stay? They stayed in tavern. Where is tavern? Tavern is in Southwark. So tavern is called Tabard Inn. Total how many travelers? 29 travelers. What does the narrator tell to the people, to the readers? The narrator tells us that as he prepared to go on such a pilgrimage, staying at a tavern in Southwark called the Tabard Inn, a great company of 29 travelers entered. So Geoffrey Chaucer is also one of the pilgrimages, travelers. So before continuing the tale, what is the meaning of the word tale? Tale means fables or stories. Before continuing the tale, the narrator declares his intent to list and describe each of the members of a group. Intent meaning he desires. Jeffrey Chaucer explains about each members of the group before he starts to narrate the tale in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales. Pilgrims travelled to visit the remains of the Saint Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, who was murdered in 1170 by knights of King Henry II. Why did the pilgrimages travel to Canterbury? To visit the remains of Saint Thomas Becket. Remains. What is the synonym of relics? Remains. So pilgrims traveled to visit the remains. Remains meaning relics. Pilgrims traveled to visit the remains of the Saint Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, who was murdered in 1170 by knights of King Henry II. How did Saint Thomas Becket die? He was murdered. Who murdered Saint Thomas Becket? Knights of Henry II. The pilgrims represent a diverse cross-section of 14th century English society. Medieval social theory divided society into three broad classes called estates: the military, the clergy, and the laity. What is the meaning of a diverse cross-section of 14th century English society? A diverse cross-section of 14th century English society means a comprehensive look at all social levels, classes, and professions in medieval England, from the rich nobility to poor peasants, clergy, merchants, and laborers, showing their different lives, values, and interactions. What are the three estates? The military, the clergy, and the laity. Medieval social theory was rooted in a divinely ordained static hierarchy. Prologue to the Canterbury Tales. We are discussing Prologue to the Canterbury Tales. General Prologue. The narrator opens the general prologue with a description of the return of spring. He describes the April rains, the burgeoning flowers and leaves, and the chirping birds. Around this time of year, the narrator says, people begin to feel the desire to go on a pilgrimage to Canterbury to visit the relics of Saint Thomas Becket in Canterbury Cathedral. The narrator tells us that as he prepared to go on such a pilgrimage, staying at a tavern in Southwark called the Tabard Inn, a great company of 29 travelers entered. Before continuing the tale, the narrator declares his intent to list and describe each of the members of the group. Pilgrims traveled to visit the remains of Saint Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, who was murdered in 1170 by knights of King Henry II. The pilgrims represent a diverse cross-section of 14th century English society. Medieval social theory divided society into three broad classes called estates: the military, the clergy, and the laity. Let me ask you a few questions. What is the meaning of the word prologue? What is Canterbury? What is the meaning of the word tales? What is Canterbury tales? What is the meaning of the word literature? What is modern literature? Who are the major authors in modern literature? Who is Chaucer? What is the full name of Chaucer? What is the season in the Canterbury Tales? How does General Prologue open? Who wrote General Prologue? What is the meaning of the word burgeoning? What is the meaning of the word chirruping? Whose relics is in Canterbury Cathedral? What is the meaning of the word cathedral? Relics, pilgrimage. What is tabard inn? What is tavern? Where is tavern? How many travelers ended in tavern or tabard inn? Why do pilgrims travel to Canterbury? What is the meaning of the word relics? What is the synonym of relics? Who is Thomas Becket? How did Thomas Becket die? Whom does the pilgrims represent? Medieval social theory. What are the three estates? So today we discussed Canterbury Tales, Prologue to the Canterbury Tales. Prologue to the Canterbury Tales was written by Geoffrey Chaucer. He was called Chaucer. His full name is Geoffrey Chaucer. His period is between 1340 to 1400. Geoffrey Chaucer was the father of English literature, father of English poetry. He was the first English literature writer, author, poet, buried in Westminster Abbey. So it is called Poet's Corner. So Canterbury Tales is an anthology. It contains 24 short stories. Anthology means collections of writings written by different authors on a same topic. With this, we wind up this class. Please subscribe my channel.